Cuy'val Dar. Greetings, I am Tad Larkin, the lore master of Manda-LORE, and today I'll be digging through the archives to elaborate on the Cuy'val Dar. The Cuy'val Dar were a group of 75 Mandalorians who were given the daunting task of training the clone Commandos, the Republic's elite special forces clone troopers. 10 years before the Battle of Geonosis, and approximately 32 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Mandalorian bounty hunter Jango Fett accepted a challenge from Darth Tyrannus to eliminate Kamari Vosa, the leader of the dangerous crime syndicate called the Bando Gora. Immediately after tracking her down to one of the moons of Bogdan and killing her, Jango was approached by Tyrannus himself, with more than just his 5 million credit reward, but also an offer to be the prime template for a clone army. After learning the clone army's true purpose and negotiating his own clone son and protege out of the deal, Jango accepted and traveled to Kamino to become the progenitor of the Grand Army of the Republic. While most of the regular clone trainees in the GAR, destined to be run-of-the-mill grunt clone troopers, would receive flash training at the hands of computers and simulators en masse, the more specialized clone infantry would require hands-on training and instruction. To aid Jango in this task, he recruited 100 of the most capable warriors and soldiers he knew to be the instructors for the clone Commandos, elite Spec Ops clones used for recon, sabotage, extraction, and assassination. 75 out of these 100 training sergeants were Mandalorian, and they named themselves the Cuy'val Dar, the Mandoa phrase for those who no longer exist, because, to ensure the GAR's secrecy, they were forbidden from having any sort of contact with their friends and family during their tenure on Kamino. Records of every single Cuy'val Dar are for the most part unavailable. However, the few official members that we do have records of include Ba'aran Apma, Rav Brawler, Court Davin, Midge Gillamar, Dread Priest, Isabet Rao, Cal Scarata, Wade Tehai, Vontae Tervo, Wallen Vow, Lance Ward, and unofficially my father, Jace Larkin. This ragtag band of former mercenaries, assassins, and bounty hunters would each be given the charge of training 26 commando squads, made up of 4-man teams known as pods to the clone commando cadets themselves. With each training sergeant bringing his or her own unique skill set to the table, cross-training with other sergeants was more than common. For example, Midge Gillamar, who was a trained medical professional before becoming a Mandalorian, would often give lessons to cadets outside of his assigned training group in first aid, triage, and other useful medical knowledge that would help them save the lives of their brothers on the battlefield. With differences in personalities and skill sets, the Cuy'val Dar left differentiating imprints on their commando trainees, and though each commando squad emerged from training as a fully capable fighting unit, there would be noticeable differences between commando squads trained by different sergeants. Commandos trained by Cal Scarata, for example, were more brotherly and had a familial outlook than, say, commandos trained by Wallen Vow, who had more of a survivalist outlook and didn't view their training sergeant as a father figure like the Scarata commandos did. What was common on the curriculum of a majority of the Cuy'val Dar, however, was the Mandalorian culture, the culture of the clone's progenitor. Though not all of the Cuy'val Dar would teach their cadets the ways of the Mandalorians, most of them thought it was important to instill a sense of being Mandalorian in their trainees. The thought behind this was not just to carry on the Mandalorian legacy, but also to encourage a broader sense of camaraderie amongst the commandos, increasing unit cohesion and, by extension, combat effectiveness. None felt this more strongly than Cal Scarata, who thought it his duty to teach these clones their heritage, so much so that he'd give many of his trainees nicknames in Mandoa to call them, rather than their number designations. Though their primary focus was on their commando cadets, various members of the Cuy'val Dar formed bonds with each other, as well as forged friendships that would outlast their time on Kamino. There was also drama behind the scenes as well. Wallen Vow earned the ire of several of the other training sergeants for pushing his cadets too hard, punishing them cruelly, and even deliberately letting his cadets die in live-fire exercises, though it would prove effective as his commandos had the highest survival rate. The Cuy'val Dar would cease being those who no longer exist in 22 BBY, when the Grand Army of the Republic was mobilized to the fateful Battle of Geonosis, and subsequently the Clone Wars, effectively ending their contracts. A majority of them would try to pick up where they left off a decade ago, while others found it more difficult and started new lives with their small fortunes. As hard as they trained, a staggering 4,982 clone commando casualties were sustained at the Battle of Geonosis, due largely in part to the inexperience of the Jedi as commanders, and their improper use of a majority of the commandos as open field infantry rather than their intended Spec Ops purpose. Seeing this, some of the Cuy'val Dar, mainly Cal Skirata, stayed on with the GAR as military advisors to the Special Operations Brigade to better advise the Jedi on how to effectively utilize Spec Ops forces. As the war dragged on into its second year, Wallen Vau, Midge Gillimar, and Wade Tehai returned to help train the next batch of clone commandos, as well as cross-train promising clone trooper candidates as commandos to help reinforce the commandos' loss to battlefield attrition. Some even joined Alpha 17's enhanced training program to help train the next generation of clone commanders for the battles to come. Towards the war's end, many of the Cuy'val Dar and some of the commandos and ARC troopers they grew close to over the years became disillusioned with the Republic and sought a way out. The effort, led by Cal Skirata, intended to find a cure for the clones' accelerated aging, and setting up a refuge on Manda-LORE for any clone that wished to desert the GAR and live a full and normal life. With the help of Wallen Vau, Midge Gillimar, Rav Browler, and Dr. Ovalet Kale Olthan, a captured CIS scientist who created a FET genome-targeting nanovirus earlier in the war, they succeeded in stopping the clones' accelerated aging. Following Order 66, far from the capital city of Keldabe, they built a settlement, Kyrimerut, for Cal and his adopted clone sons, with the mission of aiding any clone who wished to find a way out and live a more fulfilling life. Cal Skirata and his interesting story will be further explained in another transmission. As the Galactic Republic made its transition into the Galactic Empire in 19 BBY, there were some former Cuy'val Dar who had more selfish desires. Dread Priest and Isabet Rao worked with Lorca Gadik to help resurrect the Death Watch, an extremist splinter faction of Mandalorians who were defeated by Jango Fett after the Mandalorian Civil War decades earlier. Seeking to work with the Empire to strengthen Manda-LORE rather than it remain independent, Dread Priest tried to recruit Midge Gillimar and Ordo Skirata, but was promptly met with a vibroblade to his femoral artery and his corpse dumped into a river. Unfortunately, the fates of the known Cuy'val Dar after this point remains uncertain. However, some of the clones trained and adopted by Skirata settled down and had families of their own, and some even survived past the Second Galactic Civil War, 40 years after the Battle of Yavin. This transmission was commissioned by Captain Chewbacca. If you have any suggestions for future transmissions, don't be afraid to drop a comment. Special thanks to my patrons, Wildcat144, The Grand Pope, Zexend, J-Trips 1997, David Miller, AJ Can't Think of a Good Pun Right Now, Captain Chewbacca, Dave the Grave, 97 Poop Dealer, Hugo Novotny, and Robert Bloomsburg. If you'd like to support this channel, please visit my Patreon to find out how. Link is in the description. In the meantime, keep your comm channels open for future transmissions, and don't forget to subscribe. Tad Larkin, out.